All right, so as people are concerned about me this week, they're like, dude, you're in the belly of the beast. Dude, are you going to shower more when you get home after spending time in D.C.? Not exactly. My next guest was asked me a similar question, strangely enough. Mark Mix, president of the National Right to Work Committee. He spends time in D.C. He knows how, I don't know, how it can be and what it's like here in the belly of the beast trying to get things done. Mark, good morning.
Beltway. So we've got no inside the Beltway mentality here at Right to Work.
Well, I appreciate that. No, you work on the outside to try to help the working man and woman get access to employment, gainful employment, without being forced to join a union. And look, unions are more desperate today. I think it's a fair way to put it. And I say that because I know in 1979, there were 1.5 million members of the United Auto Workers Union. Today, it's less than 500,000. And those that are representing people in the auto industry is like 200,000. So these unions, like the UAW, have shrunk. They need membership. They need money. They need to claw and scratch their way back to more funding and more relevance, right? So that makes them, I guess, a cornered animal is desperate. Is that a fair way to look at it?
Well, indeed it is, Steve, and unfortunately they're relying on government action for their power and privilege as opposed to selling a product to the American worker that might buy it if they focused on the shop floor instead of what's happening in Lansing, Michigan, or Washington, D.C., or Sacramento, California.
Right.
I mean, they're more interested in politics than they are in policy when it comes to workers' rights and the conditions of employment in the workplace.
So how many states now, you've been at this for a long time, trying to get the opportunity for people just to be able to go to work. Now, look, those on the left side of the aisle, they'd like everything to be unions because those unions that take all those union dues bankroll their campaigns. They bankroll their private parties on, well, look, it's Friday night. There's probably some parties tonight being held right here in Washington, D.C., being funded by those very unions because they have lobbyists and this and that, and the Democrats get lots of money from them. So they're kind of in bed together, aren't they?
Yeah, indeed they are. In fact, we estimate, based on their filings, that they spend about $2 billion every 2 years on politics.
Whoa. Billion.
Yeah, Steve, come on. You're in D.C. Billion means nothing. That's rounding errors for everybody else in the world. You got to talk trillions here, But anyway, they raise and spend about $35 billion a year from dues money and government contracts. And during the last 4 years, during the halcyon years of union power with Joe Biden in the White House, Mr. Big Labor, I mean, they prospered very, very well. But again, to your point, they focus on Washington, not on the shop floor. And the United Auto Workers Union, as you mentioned, Steve, one of their primary constituencies now are graduate students in colleges across the country. I mean, those folks aren't putting lug nuts on tires or wheels. They're making policy, and the unrest on college campuses. You see UAW signs walking around when they're boycotting and divesting and sanctioning Israel and from the river to the sea.
Well, let me ask you this, Mark. I told you, and I told the folks here, I'm very privileged today to be in the traveling press pool that'll be flying with Donald Trump to Pittsburgh, where he's going to talk about this big influx of $14 billion into steel. Of course, steel is a unionized industry, very unionized. But and the president very focused on the one big beautiful bill. He's focused on securing the border. Right to work, very important. He likes the idea of right to work from all the things that I've heard. But what are some of the things you'd like to see from this administration to make it easier for mom and dad or anybody to go to work without being basically coerced into joining a union and paying union dues to an organization they may not otherwise have anything to do with?
Yeah, well, let's start with the policy on public sector unions, and that is the federal government unions. He's done a fantastic job at looking at government and saying, why in the world are we negotiating with private organizations over how the federal government's going to run? And so one of the things that's happened that's been very, very exciting is the idea of rolling back that power in the public sector. Steve, you and I have talked about this. You know that in many states, including yours, the union government, the government sector unions are one of the most powerful forces in politics because they, have control over these, quote, necessary services. in the private sector, he's basically looked at the National Labor Relations Board, which is the 5-member board that adjudicates labor policy for private sector workers. They have done some fairly significant issues there when it comes to the general counsel of that organization, that independent agency, and the members of that board. There's lots of litigation. Everything he's done has been challenged by the unions and by the left, by the Marxists, and they, because they love the control they have. So there's lots of things he's been doing. We would like to see him getting the government further out of kind of the unionization movement, because it's the government power that gives unions the privilege of forcing workers to pay dues as a condition of employment in the 24 states that don't have right to work. Now, Steve,
Yeah.
I'm a government school graduate, so I know there's 50 states. There's 24 that don't have right to work. That means 26 do, to answer your question.
I'm pretty sure Barack Obama told us there were 57, but hey,
No, just 50.
Just 50. Look, Franklin Roosevelt, the New Dealer, a progressive through and through. He was smart enough to say you should never have public sector unions, and yet they came anyway. Can we ever excuse ourselves from that? Honestly, Mark, can we ever get away from that completely?
Well, I think there's places where you can do it. I think at the federal level, the president has said, look, we're going to take anybody that has a national security profile of any kind, and we're going to say we're not going to bargain over conditions of employment and how they're going to operate during a national emergency, if there was one, and God forbid there will be one. But anyway, in the states, we've seen a movement to roll back union power, like Wisconsin, Scott Walker.
Yeah.
And one of the things that changed the economics of that state was basically severely limiting the power of union officials to demand that they, stand at the public trough and collect all this money from Wisconsin taxpayers. And frankly, even the left is happy about what happened out there. When you talk about the folks in Milwaukee, they said, gosh, this kind of saved the city. And I think what we're going to see going forward, Steve, we're going to see some, like Illinois is in serious financial trouble. California is in serious financial trouble.
And they are of their own doing. Now, I want you to come back soon because I still want to talk about the National Labor Relations Board. I didn't get to that. Again, it's Donald Trump being, blocked by activist judges, which seems to be the latest sport here in D.C. But we'll talk about that next time, Mark. I always appreciate you being here, my friend. You always have a big smile on your face, no matter how tough the fight is. He's from the National Right to Work Committee. He's the president, my friends. Mark Mix on a Friday.